I have a student with hearing loss in my classroom. Now what?
Hi, I'm Dr. Linda, school audiologist, and we're here for a special version of Stump the Audiologist. Today we have a special guest with us. Please welcome with me Julie Goodick, teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Linda. I am glad to be with you today.
Part 1. Julie and Dr. Linda begin their conversation with hearing loss audio samples. What does a student with hearing loss miss in the classroom? And they begin to discuss typical classroom accommodations for students who have hearing loss. We do offer several handouts that you can download as a supplement to these videos. There is more detail about hearing loss and other topics that we just touch upon with these introductory videos. We also include on our handouts several video links that we have found very beneficial for classroom teachers and parents that can provide you with more information about your student with hearing loss in your classroom. Let's start with the audiogram. This is the graph we use that shows a person's hearing ability. There is a continuum of hearing going from normal all the way to profound in terms of hearing levels. Hearing loss can affect various pitches or frequencies of speech, and this is also a variable as we look at hearing ability. So we aren't just looking at a loss of volume when we have hearing loss. Let's listen to a few samples of hearing loss affecting different pitches. Once upon a time there was a small gentleman who went to the tailor with a little piece of cloth which he wanted to have made up. Once upon a time there was a small gentleman who went to the tailor with a little piece of cloth which he wanted to have made up. Once upon a time there was a small gentleman who went to the tailor with a little piece of cloth which he wanted to have made up. Once upon a time there was a small gentleman who went to the tailor with a little piece of cloth which he wanted to have made up. Okay, now let's do the same passage, only let's add some typical background classroom noise, and let's see how well we do. Once upon a time there was a small gentleman who went to the tailor with a little piece of cloth which he wanted to have made up. Once upon a time there was a small gentleman who went to the tailor with a little piece of cloth which he wanted to have made up. Once upon a time there was a small gentleman who went to the tailor with a little piece of cloth which he wanted to have made up. These were samples of how children hear without amplification. One of the links on our downloadable handout does have a link from Vermont that demonstrates how it sounds like to hear through a hearing aid in a classroom. We encourage you to check this one out. Now that you've heard the samples of different hearing loss levels, consider your student in your classroom and the degree of hearing loss he or she has.
And if you don't know your student's degree of hearing loss, ask the school's audiologist or teacher for the deaf and hard of hearing, who is on the student's IEP for this information.
Julie, why don't you share a few things we could see in the classroom when a student has a mild hearing loss?
Oh, sure. The student with mild hearing loss may have trouble hearing speech clearly when it is more than 10 to 12 feet away in a totally quiet room, or could have trouble hearing speech clearly at a distance of 6 feet away when there is typical classroom background noise. This happens because many of our key consonant sounds in English are very quiet. Some of these sounds include S, SH, T, K, P, F, CH, and TH. Once noise is added to the room, as we heard in our earlier samples, these speech sounds are often harder to hear.
Boy, the term mild in mild hearing loss certainly doesn't mean the student has mild problems.
That's for sure. A student could easily miss 50% of what his or her teacher says if the student is not wearing hearing aids. But even when wearing hearing aids, Many of our students still mishear and think you said something completely different than what was said. Even with lip reading, understanding what is said can be difficult. Did you know that only 30 to 40% of the English language is visible upon the mouth? So lip reading for a person with hearing loss isn't always foolproof.
When we listened to the different hearing level samples earlier, I remember thinking, wow, a moderate hearing loss is fairly significant. Even if the student is wearing hearing aids, they might only hear you clearly when you are very close, when there is background noise. Of course, we can't generalize with any of our students with hearing loss. Each student with a mild, moderate, or severe hearing loss doesn't hear in the same way. These students aren't just missing volume of speech, but the clarity of speech. One student may be able to clearly hear 80% of what a teacher says, and another student with the same degree of hearing loss may only clearly hear 40% of what a teacher says. And that's even with hearing aids.
Hearing aids aren't like glasses. You don't put them in and hear and understand 100% of what you hear. When we consider the student with a severe or profound hearing loss, these students must really struggle with understanding their classroom teacher, even with hearing aids. These students really rely on visual support to enhance their hearing. Don't forget, it is not uncommon for some of these students not to want to wear their hearing aids once they become teenagers. Imagine the impact that has on learning too.
We have heard what a hearing loss can sound like and how noise can make it more difficult to hear. We haven't talked about how distance in the classroom can also compound the difficulties that our student has. Okay, we have an example here of a high school student in your classroom, and you are speaking at a distance of approximately 8 feet from your mouth to his ears. What we know about this student is he has what is called a listening bubble of approximately 3 feet. That means he can hear his best at 3 feet distance. So in this example, he really doesn't know what his teacher said, and he is picking up on the hallway chatter, which is closest to the microphone that is at his ear on his home hearing aids. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty, Julie. What is the first thing a classroom teacher should do when they find out they have a student in their classroom who has a hearing loss?
Okay, number 1. Find out the degree of hearing loss that your student has and review the hearing level audio on this video to have a better understanding or feel for what your student may be hearing.
I'll go with number 2. Number 2, find out what your student's distance listening ability is. For example, can your student clearly hear you at 3 feet, 6 feet, or 10 feet? This will not only tell you at what distances they hear you, but also the peers that are sitting at a variety of distances in the classroom. Also, you will need to find out if they are wearing amplification or home hearing aids or a cochlear implant.
And number 3, what are the accommodations that this student has so they can make the best use of the hearing that they do have? These will be listed specifically on the student's IEP, but we will mention some of them that you may not be familiar with and why some students need these supports. There's a downloadable handout on the do's and don'ts of working with students who have hearing loss that supplements this video. Linda, why don't you share about personal FM systems that many of our students use?
Okay, let's go back to our example of the student who can only hear at a distance of 3 feet with his hearing aids. Now the teacher is wearing a microphone, and it is transmitting the teacher's voice via FM radio waves right to the student's ear. And the student is wearing receivers in his ears. The student FM receivers are programmed to the student's specific hearing loss. They are both FM and hearing aid systems. Essentially, this device helps to overcome the distance and the distance plus noise problems that the typical deaf hard of hearing student has when hearing and understanding the classroom teacher. And it's just like magic. The student hears the peers close by with the microphone that's on the receiver of his ears, and then he is hearing the teacher at a slightly louder level than what he is hearing from his peers. I'm sure you have figured out that this is a different type of microphone and amplification system than the sound-filled system microphone that many teachers are now using in their classrooms. Some teachers have been also using these with their smartboard systems, and they are simply marvelous. The sound-filled system speakers that are installed in the ceiling or side walls in the classroom are generally at a distance greater than the listening bubble of most of our deaf hard of hearing students. While a great tool for most general education students, most of our deaf hard of hearing students unfortunately do not have the distance listening ability to benefit from sound-filled amplification. There are, however, some exceptions. This includes students who have hearing that is normal in one ear and abnormal in the other ear. For more information about sound-filled systems, be sure to check out our downloadable handouts.
So the personal FM system reduces the distance that is such a problem with many of our students.
That is right, Julie. It helps the student hear the teacher to the best of the student's abilities. We know these students won't get 100%, but we do hope for 85% or better. This may not be possible, though, with a number of our students. The students still will have difficulty hearing peers who are at distances, so the teacher may have to pass his or her microphone around or repeat back what a student says who is speaking across the room, for the student, for example.
So number 3 is to find out the accommodations that the students may need. One of these accommodations might be a personal FM system that is used in all classroom settings as you just described. Another accommodation might be some specific visual communication support. Your student may have an American Sign Language interpreter or acute speech transliterator to help him or her understand what is being said. The ASL interpreter or acute speech transliterator transforms English speech into a visual communication system. The student with hearing loss who uses an interpreter or transliterator may also use an FM system. You might be wondering why 2 different systems are being used. This is because the students may not be receiving enough information from vision or from hearing or both. This way, the student has access to your voice as well as to the other students in the classroom.
Boy, our students really have to do a lot to learn, don't they? It must be fatiguing by the end of the school day to be listening intently and visually watching all the time.
It really is. Thanks for bringing up the student's need to visually watch. It is important that you aren't covering your mouth when you are speaking or turn away from your DHA student. You want your student to benefit from all visual support that he or she can use to supplement his or her hearing system. Oh, just a little hint. People think that you can lip read everything that is said, but much of what is said isn't even seen on the mouth. So a student who relies on lip reading only for classroom information could likely be misunderstanding what is said. It helps, but it only helps to a certain degree.
I hope you have a great